Welcome to the Organizational Intelligence Podcast, the podcast about people, practice, and possibilities. We spend a tremendous amount of time in organizations talking about strategy, transformation, culture, innovation, AI, leadership, engagement, performance, all of these big things. Yet decades of organizational research consistently point to something both surprising and incredibly mundane. Organizations rarely fail because they lack smart people or good intentions. They struggle because of the everyday mechanics of work itself. How decisions get made, how information flows, how meetings are run, how accountability is created, how power operates, how teams coordinate, how leaders create clarity or confusion. The irony is that some of the biggest performance drivers inside organizations are also the least glamorous topics we discuss. Today's conversation isn't about next management trend or the next transformation framework or the next shiny future of work prediction. It's about something much more fundamental. What if the future of work actually depends on us getting the basics of ways of working right? Today, I'm thrilled, almost giddy, to welcome someone who has profoundly shaped how I think about work over the last few years. If you've ever seen me smiling to myself while listening to a podcast on a walk or during a drive, chances are I was listening to Sam Spurlin and Rodney Evans from The Ready. Sam is one of those rare thinkers who changed not just what I think about organizations, but how I think about organizations. Sam is now an independent consultant under his practice Deliberate Works. Through his work on organizational design, self-management, teaming, and modern ways of working, he's helped thousands of leaders rethink some of the most fundamental assumptions we make about work itself. And honestly, I'm over the moon to have him as one of the inaugural guests of Organizational Intelligence because much of the thinking behind this podcast has been influenced by the ideas Sam has spent years exploring and sharing. Sam, welcome to the OI.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a very kind introduction. I'm going to make sure I have that saved and listen to it on repeat when I'm feeling down.
Oh my God. Well, I'm thrilled. And, I'm tuning in from Dubai. You're tuning in from New York. So let's get you a little bit closer to our audience here. What's one thing about you that people would never find in your LinkedIn or in your professional bio?
That's a good question. I don't think I really write on LinkedIn much about how big of a role ice hockey played in my life, especially as a kid. I grew up in Southeast Michigan, so like a lot of kids in that area of the world, played a lot of ice hockey, and got to experience some travel and some other really cool things thanks to playing hockey. And yeah, it kind of set me on a path to thinking about like why are some people really successful in their endeavors and others not. Like the whole idea, I first became really interested in the idea of growth mindset because I realized as a teenager I did not have it when it came to my hockey career, which is why it kind of stalled out at the college level. And while some of my teammates and my friends went on to play in the NHL, and it was like a very interesting thing for me to like think back on, like what was it different about them and compared to me. And probably a much more involved answer than you were looking for in this check-in round, but big hockey guy over here, and continue to be.
And I didn't know that, although I listened to all of your checking questions. So I think that I know a fair amount of maybe personal information
Sure.
about you, but this one I didn't
Yeah.
know.
Well, there you
Thank
go. I
you.
guess I met the requirement.
You did. You absolutely did. Okay.
Yeah.
You spent more than a decade helping organizations rethink how work actually happens. What's one thing most organizations believe about themselves that is simply not true?
I think I have to come in on particularly on the change side of things. So a pattern that has shown up over and over in the work that I've done so far in my career is that organizations feel and believe that because they have big challenges, big problems, that the only way to solve those problems, to start to make things better, is to take really big swings. Like obviously, if we have a big problem, then we need a big solution in order to solve that problem, which I think makes potentially sense on its face. However, it is really hard to do really big things in an organization. The more people you involve, the bigger and bigger it gets, the slower and slower things go, and eventually you don't really end up doing anything. So I think a key insight of the Ready's work for a decade and more, and the work that I'm carrying forward, is that sometimes really small and subtle interventions, experiments, changes to an organization have much larger impact than we may expect. And at the very least, even if we feel like we have really big problems in our organization, we shouldn't shy away from doing smaller things to get going in the right direction.
Thank you. And I think this is really the essence of what I try to channel with this specific episode, is that it really starts with the basics, with the most simple things. It does not have to be these big leads and like these huge initiatives. Um, Most organizations think they're intelligent because they hire smart people. And we see the race in hiring the unicorn, right? But what actually makes an organization intelligent, according to you?
Well, I think you're right in that organizations like to talk about, we hire intelligent people and therefore we are intelligent. But I think a lot of the organizations we work with, at least, really don't, they hire intelligent people and then put them into systems where they don't get to use that intelligence, basically. And that is kind of the cornerstone of a lot of the work that we've done. Because I think actual intelligence, it's definitely more than just the sum of the individual people who are in an organization, the sum of their intelligence. I think it is the ability for these intelligent folks to come together in unexpected ways to solve the problems of an organization. And I think a lot of times people, leaders, but even just people in organizations, particularly if you've only really worked in a really bureaucratic organization, have this idea that the organization has already figured out how we have to do everything. And now it's just a matter of bringing people in to run those plays or to do those things. And of course, there are certainly things in organizations where it is just a matter of like, we figured out the way to do it. So like, let's just do it really well. And, I think there's interesting things there. But more and more, the real intelligence of an organization is, can the people in your organization solve the problems that aren't even problems yet, that are either so small that they're not really being perceived as problems, or they are problems that are coming down the pike in the future? And do we have the ability to see those things coming and to arrange ourselves, to organize ourselves to do things now that will make our situation in the future better?
Because I mentioned unicorns. In a lot of instances, you bring a unicorn to a broken system and you break that unicorn basically because they cannot function in that very dysfunctional setting.
Yeah.
And we talk about empowering people. And where do you think organizations believe they're empowering people or they're actually creating dependency?
So I think empowerment, and that even just that word empower, is often really abused in organizations. I think there's a whole philosophical conversation to potentially have around, are you really empowered if it has to be kind of bestowed upon you by
Mhm.
somebody else? Is that actual empowerment? We can set that aside and let's assume we're talking about a situation where an organization or like legitimately wants to have people step into more authority, be able to make more decisions. Um, that sort of work, I think often gets really kind of muddled by other things going on in an organization. So let me describe a pattern that I've seen on more than one occasion as it relates to empowerment. So you have an organizational leader who's like, okay, we really want to empower our people. And they, make some sort of declaration. Hey, you all are empowered. I want you to make your own decisions, et cetera, et cetera. People take them at face value and they start doing things and they make some decisions that are suboptimal, like something bad happens. And the empowerment ends very quickly there. So the idea that we can just kind of flip the switch and have people be empowered is a really oversimplified view of what it actually means to give people more authority in an organization. It is a process of people learning how to step into that empowerment, of leaders uh, letting go of the decisions and the power that is inherent in giving it to other people. And the operating system idea, which I'm sure I'll end up talking more about in the future, but the idea here is that in that situation that I just described, you gave people authority without necessarily giving them access to the information or the training or the mastery that they need to make good decisions. And then when they inevitably made subpar decisions, we acted surprised and got upset about it. What would it look like to tackle this whole empowerment initiative with some other smart thinking about how do we give people access to information? What information do people even need? And can they access it? Do they know what to do with it? And suddenly we're having a much more nuanced conversation about what it means for people to step into more authority rather than just kind of waving this empowerment wand around and expecting everything to change.
Very, very well explained. And yes, definitely, I feel like the empowerment in itself is like a whole episode that we have to just like delve deep in there.
Yeah,
But
you should definitely do an episode
a part two.
on that, because it's so interesting to think about, because I think a lot of times when we talk about empowerment, people are really focused on the people who are being empowered.
Yeah.
And like, what do we need to do to like help them? Even in my answer, like I just talked about, what information do they need? I think a sometimes more interesting thing to, or maybe as interesting thing to talk about, is like, what is the leader's experience of an empowerment initiative? Because here you're really talking now about how do you handle the quote unquote loss of power, because you're handing it to other people. What is your role in this newly empowered organization if before you predominantly made decisions and people brought you problems and you solved those problems? Like, we're talking about shifting your dynamic as well
Yeah.
as a leader. And that is just as much of a change for them as it is for the people kind of closer to the front lines who are quote unquote being empowered.
I love this angle of empathy, because it's very true. We look at the person who's going to assign to the job or assign that responsibility and becoming empowered, but you forget how much weight that may have on the higher level, because they maybe start feeling useless or like not as important anymore. And like, what's their role? Like, yeah, probably we'll talk about that at a different time, but their role, I think, becomes a lot of it like this coaching and opening doors and yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Absolutely. Like, and I know I started with dependency here and I kind of lost a little bit my train of thoughts, but I need to get
Well,
back
I
to
think
where
it might have been because I didn't actually answer your question and I heard empowerment and talked about the thing that I wanted to. I can try to help bring it back
No, no,
onto
that's
the
okay.
path.
I think you covered a pretty important chunk, but I was thinking about dependency because in my experience, I wanted to be kind of almost our segue. Like, dependency is exactly what fills the vacuum when there isn't shared way of working, like explicit and designed. So let's start there and explain what we mean by ways of working. I didn't plan on this, but I think it's worth adding here. I've had to answer it myself more than once, explaining what ways of work means, because it feels like such a vague concept for people. Like, you have to put words on it. And so, can you define for the audience what ways of working actually means, like from you?
Well, yeah. I think my thinking about ways of working have evolved over time. I mean, here's kind of where I sit on it today. You already have ways of working in your organization. Every organization has ways of working, obviously. For a lot of organizations, those ways of working are almost entirely implicit, so we don't really talk about them.
Mhm.
You just learn them when you join that organization, or if you've been there for a really long time, they kind of just evolve over time without necessarily anybody deciding like we're going to do it this way or not. And in those sorts of organization, the ways of workings that emerge, some of it works really well. A lot of it doesn't work very well at all. And there's a whole kind of like middle gray zone of some ways of working that work for some folks and not for others. So when we're talking about that, it's about, can we make this somewhat invisible layer of our organization visible enough to talk about? And once it's visible enough to talk about, can we perhaps make some decisions about how we actually want to do these things? These things that we have just inherited from who knows where. Are we cool with that? Like, okay, if it already works, great. Let's just like be explicit about that. And for those things that we've inherited that aren't really working, well, what other things might we want to try? What other things have we heard about or we're just curious about that may actually be a better way of working? And what sort of agreements do we then need to make with each other as teammates or between teams or across an organization to actually try these ways of working and see if they actually work better for us? That's my kind of summation of the concept, I think.
I love that. I'm just going to add, maybe I'm going to answer your question about the
Great.
definition of it from my side, but I think of it like I define it by its absence. In the absence of ways of working, what we're doing, we're actually working. It becomes the predominance of the personal preference of whoever holds the highest level of authority in the room, right? Like we work the way that our boss instructs us to work or wants us to work. We start working to please. And so that is in the absence of it. Let's make it one level more maybe tangible and more concrete. Because one of the clearest places the absence of ways of working shows up is meetings. And I know you're the meetings
Oh
guru.
God.
I'll
Is
put
that is
myself
that what's on my business card now?
somewhere. I've read it somewhere. And you have written so much
Okay.
about meetings, and I will bring some of
Sure.
your snippets.
Sure.
But I'll put myself
Yeah.
on the hook first here. Like I've worked
Okay.
remotely for almost 8 years now, or almost 9 years, actually. And I still can't tell whether meetings are helping us work or preventing us from working.
Right.
What's your take in a couple of sentences only? As we'll dig deeper in meetings in a little bit. Like really briefly, what do you think of that?
I mean, I think you're getting in my head now by making me be brief. That's a good call on your point. Here's my hot take. Meetings are incredibly important and they are real work. And too frequently they are not treated with the amount of design and attention that they should, given how important they are. Is that short
On
enough?
point. On point.
Okay.
I like concise. I like concise. Okay. I think the primary issue with meeting is that you start generally with an agenda. Like there's always kind of an intent. We start with an agenda, but then turns into a senseless mumbo jumbo of sharing updates here, reacting to things there, listening to work to be done on the other side, discussing something that was discussed before. Like we never stick to what we start with. And I'm gonna quote you here. You wrote this in 2018. See, I did my homework.
Oh,
You
wow.
say,
Okay.
bad meetings are very bad. Vast quantities of human creativity, motivation, and energy die in corporate meetings every day. It's a tragedy of epic proportions met with defeated shrugs and murmurs of, meetings just suck, you know. It doesn't have to be that way. Meetings done right are one of the most powerful tools available to teams, but great meetings don't happen by accident.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
All right. I still
Now, you can
agree with
expand.
that.
Now you can expand. What actually makes a meeting good on purpose?
So many things. Let's see. So what you just described, not the quote, but just kind of describing the experience of a typical meeting, my kind of diagnosis of that is most organizations have this construct that they call a meeting. And within that construct that we call meeting, we do everything. We connect as coworkers. We share updates about what's going on. We debate really important ideas. Like literally everything just happens in this ill-defined kind of generic construct called a meeting. And I think one of the most important things that organizations can do is to start having different shaped meetings for different purposes. And it doesn't have to be super elaborate. I think there's a handful of kind of default meeting types that can be really valuable. And what I mean by having a particular shape to a meeting is having a structure, a kind of process that we follow for that meeting type. And therefore, we all know if it's our weekly action meeting, we all know kind of like what to bring to it. We've already kind of primed ourselves. We know what the expectations are for us when we show up to that meeting, whether you're facilitating it or just participating. So you've already got your head kind of in the right space. And then once you show up in that meeting, you know how to play. I think a lot of energy is wasted in ill-defined meetings where we're all trying to figure out like how do I play in this space? Like I thought we were talking about this, but we spent the last 10 minutes talking about this other thing. Should I contribute to this other thing? Should I redirect us back to the thing I thought we were supposed to be doing? Like that's a lot of invisible cognitive energy that doesn't kind of come back. So having a specific structure that we have agreed to ahead of time that hey, because this meeting is all about unblocking each other and leaving this room feeling really up to date on our shared work. We are therefore going to follow this pretty specific structure, and we've all agreed to it. And we've agreed to have kind of deputize one of us as a facilitator to hold ourselves to that. So I think that is like a starting point for making meetings a little bit better and less of this just crushing experience for folks.
All your meetings start with a check-in question.
Usually, usually.
Um, Tell us more. I want the purpose behind it besides the social element. Because everyone does it for the social element of it. But I know there is more depth to it, and I want you to share that with the audience.
Sure. So, just if you're unfamiliar, the idea of a check in question is just at the beginning of the meeting, we have a question that we just go around the room and answer. And depending on kind of the vibe of the team or the comfort of the team, you could really strictly facilitate it where there's like literally no crosstalk. We're just going around and answering the question. If it's a casual team, we often will kind of use the check in round as just a little bit more of that social component of it. So while there is a lot of value of just, oh, and the other thing I was going to say about that, the check-in, the art of the check-in question is picking a question that is not going to create like really long answers necessarily. Like your check-in question shouldn't be like, explain the meaning of life. Or I don't know, maybe for your team it would make sense, but like you don't want to tee people up for like 3-minute answers and we spend 20 minutes going through the check-in round. So it should be like pretty straightforward and easy to answer. It shouldn't be that hard to think of an answer because somebody's going to have to go first and you don't want them to feel totally kind of frozen. It shouldn't be controversial. Like, so don't do political check-in questions or like religious check-in questions. Like we're not trying to put people on the spot. People have a wide range of comfort with sharing personal things. So it shouldn't be like and something that's going to like reactivate trauma for somebody. Like I'm kind of gobsmacked by some of the check-in questions that I have participated in where I'm not the one picking it, but I just have to answer it. Like you don't want that. So there's an art to picking the question. Real quick, the best check-in question though, just like everybody can file this away and use it.
Yeah.
And I don't ever use this first with a team, but once I kind of get to know them a little bit, the best check-in question is, what is the best bird? And everybody's like, what? What do you mean by
Yeah, me
best?
too.
Like the biggest or my favorite? Like, and then I don't elaborate. I just say, what is the best bird? And then everybody has an answer, and it's funny generally, and it's light and whatever. I like questions like that. However, setting all of that aside, beyond the tips and tricks, checking questions are great because it allows everybody to kind of shift their mental state from whatever they were doing before to what we are about to do right now. And I think that is a really subtle thing that becomes really important, especially if you are working in a pretty virtual environment where you don't even have the benefit of like walking down the hallway to your next meeting. You don't have that tiny little bit of time where you can just like get your head right. Like you're just clicking a button to go from one virtual meeting to another virtual meeting. There's no chance for that shift. So a check-in round is like the equivalent of like we're walking down the hallway together to go into our new space and our new context and the new topics of what we're talking about. The other thing that it gives you is that if this is a team that meets regularly, is you start to learn more about each other in these tiny, just little micro moments of learning what somebody
Mhm.
thinks is the best bird and learning like where someone grew up or what somebody's favorite thing of where they live right now is. These are checking questions that I
Mhm.
frequently use. And those things accrue over time in meaningful ways, not enough in any one moment where like, it feels like, oh, before and after the check-in round, like, I suddenly know you so much differently or so much better. But 10 weeks of weekly meeting where we do a check-in round and I've heard you answer, a funny little question or even just a straightforward, like, what has your attention right now? I think does make a material difference for how a team engages with each other over time. And it's such a small little thing. It shouldn't take longer than 3 or 5 minutes. And it's worth doing.
Thank you.
Is that
Um,
your experience of the check-in round? Like, do you do check-in rounds? What's your take on the check-in round?
Actually, I was a very good student of yours and Rodney's
Okay.
in the checking questions. So yeah, like I take checking questions very, very religiously. I've also learned through time that it's a good way to create that psychological safety where like because everyone speaks the same amount of time, pretty much everyone is ready
Oh
to
yeah,
talk.
that's the other thank you for
Um,
bringing that up. That
yeah.
that idea of if we have relatively equal speaking time in a meeting, it's a good sign of psychological safety. And just getting every voice into the meeting right off the bat on like without having to think too hard about it does change the dynamic a little bit. I've definitely felt in meetings where there's not been a check-in round and I don't really talk in the first like half or quarter of the meeting. Like you kind of have to like you start getting in your own head about how am I going to contribute? Like how am I going to be what's my first contribution to this meeting going to be 45 minutes into a 60-minute meeting? It's like, well, that's not worth it. I'll just be sit here and be quiet the whole time. It's
Yeah.
different if you've already heard your voice in the meeting.
100%, especially when there's also big like difference in seniorship would say like you have like
Sure. Yeah.
leaders and people that are much junior, people that haven't that just like recently joined the organization, giving them that space, equal space with their boss or their manager of their manager, whatever at the same time is really I feel like it's really of value. And I've seen that with some junior people, like pushing them to answer a checking question where they have never been exposed to such a practice, kind of puts lights in their eyes. Because like I'm gonna talk, and there's no risk of
Sure.
saying anything kind of stupid because it's just a checking question. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, there is
awesome.
a right answer to what is the best bird, but that's fine if you don't know the answer. So it's okay.
I will let you use this piece of information for the end of the episode.
Okay.
Hold on to it. Um,
Yeah.
okay, that idea of equal footing in the room actually connects to something else that you push hard on, which is how the agenda itself gets built. And you've noticed, like, I'm being tactical on purpose. I really want people to come out with like tangible information, not theory, etc. So you argue the agenda should be built live and in the room at the start. In my practice, we call it building the agenda on the fly. Um, and not having a pre-circulated agenda. That's going to feel very uncomfortable for a lot of readers here. I can see like people like, what? Like not having an agenda beforehand?
Yeah.
Why is the pre-written agenda a symptom of something deeper, according to you?
Place. I don't think every meeting should have an emergent agenda. I think the type of meeting that I'm talking about in that article that you're quoting, kind of this weekly sort of staff meeting, action sort of meeting, that is a perfect place for an emergent agenda because that is all about Like, what is most true for this team right now? What is most alive for people? What do we need to talk about? Because this is like a short short time horizon sort of meeting. Like, we're only going to meet weekly. We're all working on different independent parts of shared work. Let's not try to like guess what's in each other's heads, and let's just build it together. I think that's a perfect place for an emergent agenda. I don't think that every meeting should have one. I think there are meetings where like we know we're coming together to work through a specific topic. Maybe it's one person who has done a bunch of prep on that specific topic. Maybe they're bringing an artifact that we're going to work on together. That is not the place to like ask the team, like, what do you want to talk about? Like, no, we know what we're going to talk about. We're here to do this specific thing. Same thing with like a strategy meeting, which is one of those default meeting types that I talk about that's done quarterly. It has a specific structure, but it's not about kind of building an agenda in the
Yeah.
moment. But back to your question, or kind of the experience of building an agenda. It is one of those things, kind of like the empowerment thing, where it takes a little bit of time to get comfortable with that idea, even as a person who is just being asked to contribute to that agenda. So when I teach teams this new way of meeting where it does have an emergent agenda, it always takes a few weeks for people to feel, sometimes more junior people, to feel comfortable like actually adding something to that agenda. And it once you kind of get used to it, it stops being a big idea or a big deal, and everybody's is much more okay with it. But it's one of those like very subtle practices that starts to shift power dynamics in a team, sometimes in an almost invisible way. And I think there is something that feels very different about a team where you are expected as a junior member on that team to be able to answer the question, like, what do you need from your teammates right now? Like, that is a radical question in a lot of teams and a lot of organizations. Like, it's not up to you to like think about what you need. Like, we'll tell you what you got to do and just go do it. In this sort of meeting, you have to be able to answer that to be able to add something to the agenda, because that's what the agenda is essentially. It's us putting things on a list that we need to talk about, or a decision that needs to be made, or I just need you all to hear me on a thing. And you kind of have to like stand in your own power to be able to answer that and put that thing on the agenda and then represent it when we get to that agenda item. And I, as a facilitator, say, hey, what do you need? And then that kicks us off into whatever the conversation needs to be.
Nice. This is the action meeting.
Yep. Yeah. Action meeting, which for the real org nerds out there is heavily inspired by the tactical meeting in Holacracy.
Holacracy.
But basically, if you are on a team that meets weekly, because you have, some sort of shared work, if you have like a staff meeting, the action meeting with its very kind of specific structure that you go through can be a bit of a revelation in terms of like how much better it feels to do that, as opposed to what a typical staff meeting is, which is, the most senior person has their agenda, which might change a little bit week to week, but probably not that much. Maybe we go around the table and we all say what we're working on, and then, the meeting more or less ends. This is a very different, much more participatory way of showing up, which actually some people don't love, because in as boring as that first version of the meeting is that I just described, it doesn't ask a whole lot of you. Like, you can kind of just chill. And it's much harder to just chill in an action meeting where you're expected to bring agenda items. It's going to be a freewheeling conversation around other people's agenda items. People may ask things of you. Like, you got to kind of lean in a little bit more, which can be uncomfortable.
I think we need to do another episode just about meetings, just about the tactical meeting from Holacracy and how it has evolved, because like that is the way I rule. That is the only kind of meeting I swear by. That is getting shit done.
Yeah. What is it about that for you that is so attractive about it?
First, it gives you a full visibility. Like, yes, we start with the protocol and the check-in, etc. But you have your data, you have the agenda that's being built on the fly, which is basically like your agenda items is like any tension that is lived from a week to another is brought to that meeting and is being discussed, and most of the time is resolved just during that time. So I feel like you can unpack everything that happened within 1 week, address what can be addressed within that call specifically, or decide of what the next steps are going to be that it can be addressed later on. And also you have the holistic view as to what is being worked on. You don't have to be on repeat constantly, just like know what is happening in the back of the agenda. And you leave informed and you know exactly what you're walking out of the meeting to do or to accomplish. And I feel like that is the biggest win of these meetings. It's just like, you never walk out of the meeting the same way we walked in. And there are a lot of meetings you walk in and exit the meeting with the exact, so like you just wasted an hour of your time.
In fact, it's probably, I've somehow been harmed by being here. So I'm walking out worse than I was before.
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
And that's such an organizational debt. If we are talking about organizational debt, that's going to accumulate because the amount of hours and the cost of those meetings is humongous. Which takes me to, and I don't recall exactly in what context you said this, but it stayed with me. And I was driving, so I couldn't take note exactly in what context you had it, and I did not remember. But you said something about organizational debt, which is if there is a process that involves copying and pasting, there is obviously organizational debt. If you can recall what that is, please bring it back.
I don't remember specifically. I mean, what it was probably about is the idea of, one of the things we like to talk about is the status of something should live in software. Which I think is a good idea as a rule of thumb, especially if it means we don't have to have a status meeting. If we are truly just coming together to hear about the status of things, like why can't that just live in some sort of information radiator somewhere? The problem, though, is when the tools that you are using make it so that status is not kind of automatically sort of easily seen, and you have to copy things from one tool to another. And yeah, I think I was probably just feeling a little punchy at the time because there were plenty of places, this is kind of pre-AI, where there was like some copying and pasting happening. Now, like with the growth of AI tools, and not that you even need AI to like have smart automation, but generally copying and pasting is just introducing the opportunity for manual error. And there's probably a way to like connect these things automatically so that just the natural exhaust of doing the work is useful to other people. Like that's actually what we're talking about here. Just like me doing my work and what is kind of created by that naturally without me having to think about like, oh, how can I make this useful to Bob? And how can I make this useful to Mary? Just like me doing my job creates useful connections to other people that they can use that information in what they're doing without me having to think about it at all. That's kind of like I think the platonic ideal that we're shooting for.
Got it. Now I get where the rant came from. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to rant, answering 10 questions now. And these questions, we're going to try to answer them.
Are these meant to be fast?
Yes. Like you're meant to answer quickly.
All right, hold on. Let me stretch out real quick. Let me prepare.
Okay. And now let me pull my cheat sheet because like these, I have to read them. So ready?
All right. I guess so.
Don't worry if we go over a minute, but I'm trying not to I want you to just like to answer without
rapid
overthinking.
Fire.
Yes.
Okay. I am an expert at not overthinking before I talk. So this should be super easy.
Okay, let's do it. What's the most ridiculous organizational behavior that we've collectively decided is normal?
Return to office as a mandate. That we all spent 2020 through like 2021, most organizations being more productive than they've ever been in their lives, but because of the preferences of some like narcissistic leaders and the desire to create turnover, that we're forcing everybody to come work in offices again.
Okay. What's one thing humans do at work that hasn't changed in 500 years despite all our technology?
Being obsessed about who has the most power in any group.
Ooh, good one. What workplace behavior have we all agreed to tolerate that future generations will think was completely insane?
All days, like being in Zoom meetings all day long. back to my first answer, being in Zoom meetings all day long after being forced to come into an office space.
Okay. What's something leaders say they want, but when they actually get it, they hate it?
To go back to the empowerment conversation, often more empowered employees who make decisions differently than they would prefer.
What have you changed your mind about in the last 5 years of learning about organizations?
I used to think that just kind of accruing new ways of working in these kind of small practices, kind of in a disconnected way, would eventually kind of sum up into major organizational change. And while I do still think that small changes are really the only thing that's possible in most organizations in any meaningful way, you have to be much more mindful about how they kind of fit together and build on each other in order to have any shot at that really larger change.
What's a question leadership teams should ask every quarter but almost never do?
What are we going to stop doing
Oh,
and
that's a good.
actually commit to that?
Okay. What do organizations spend way too much time talking about?
Uh, really, really fine grained prioritization. Like prioritization about like, oh, this before this, or like prioritization at a level that is never referred to again outside of that meeting or outside of that offsite, when really they'd be much better off talking in much broader terms about prioritization, but in much more specific terms about trade-offs.
Mm. What do organizations spend way too little time talking about?
What I would in the ready would call their operating system and like the overall health of the operating system.
And I'm tempted to gossip here. I'm changing my question a little bit. Okay, without naming
Okay.
names, what's the most fascinating organizational dysfunction you've ever witnessed?
Ooh. I mean, this is a pattern I've seen over and over, where basically a leader said something in kind of an offhand way about like a preference or like a metric that they wanted to see. And it spun up literally like 3 weeks of work and at least 20 people kind of working almost full time to get this piece of information to them that they did not really care about and had somebody had just kind of heard them say, and through the kind of telephone game of like, oh, the CEO wants to see this thing, spun up an insane amount of work. That has happened on multiple occasions.
Oh, no. And I can see how leaders underestimate the weight of what they say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will go to the last one, and you're allowed to rant. I want you to rant a little bit, but you haven't
Oh.
been. Okay, if I gave you a billboard that every CEO in the world had to read tomorrow morning, what would it say?
It would say you need to do a lot less. I think a lot of the dysfunction in organizations comes from doing too much, just doing too much in general. And I think in some ways you can trace it back to like a deep primal fear of humans not wanting to kind of sit in silence. But in an organization, there's this like we are so good at finding ways to justify like we should still be here. And like I don't blame anyone. Like who would not do that if the alternative means that you get laid off. But I think across organizations, so much of the dysfunction is just that we have gotten so good at basically playing work that we are play acting work. We are creating things for each other to do. And I think it often starts at the very top of an organization. And I think a lot of CEOs could just benefit from doing a little bit less, being less specifically involved in things in the organization, and just start seeing what kind of shakes out from that and what sort of model you might be setting for other people in your organization to be more focused on fewer things. I can't help but feel like a lot of good would come out of that for most organizations.
So your billboard would say, do less.
Do less. Yeah, do less. You don't need to be doing all the things all the time. And I think starting at the very top would be useful. We all just need to do a little bit less, and hopefully that means we would spend more time doing more important, better things.
I was going to ask you a question to
That's fine.
close, which is what's one thing leaders could change this quarter that would immediately increase their organization's intelligence? But I feel like you're already kind of, you spilled the beans already in your
Doing
billboard.
doing less.
Doing,
Yeah, I mean, doing less, and by just to like kind of put a little bit more emphasis on that. Much of the stuff that's happening within organizations would not, like, if it went away tomorrow, it wouldn't be any worse, which then makes me think, well, what could all of these folks be doing if they weren't being forced to do stupid stuff? And I think there's a lot of really great work to be done in organizations that is just being um we are prevented from doing it because of the kind of systems that we have created, the organizational debt that we talked a little bit about. That organizational debt needs servicing. And that is the vast majority of the work that happens, I think, in lots of really large organizations. So until we are able to strip some of that organizational debt out, I think a lot of effort will continue to be kind of poured into keeping it alive when really we don't need it to be.
wow, that's heavy. Because like I wanted to close on a fun note, but that is a heavy one.
Well,
And yes,
I told you I would tell you what the best bird is at the end. Can that be our
yeah,
light
go ahead.
ending?
No. I love your
Uh,
ending. I was just like joking. But tell me, what is the best
yeah.
bird? I'm curious now.
So I actually really like a bird called a spoonbill.
Okay.
They look made up. They look like a fake bird. Everybody should go. If you don't know what a spoonbill looks like,
I'm
is that
gonna
what
Google
let
it
me make
now.
sure. Let me make sure that I'm getting that correct. Spoonbill.
I have it.
No, not a spoonbill. I mean, spoonbill looks kind of crazy too. What is the name of the crazy looking Muppet bird?
You cannot, in a checking question, by the way,
Oh, it's
ask another question. That doesn't work that way. Like, we're trying to teach people good habits here.
if you're the facilitator, you can do whatever you want. That's the real lesson here.
I am the
I meant the
facilitator.
shoe bill. The shoe bill.
Okay,
It's
I'm gonna
crazy
look up
looking
the shoe
bird.
bill and I will share the
The
shoe bill photo with the
shoe bill
audience.
store. It's crazy looking. Its beak is so huge. And if you ever watch a video of one, the sound that it can make, it literally sounds like a machine gun, but it's just this beak going up and
Oh,
down.
yeah,
It's
that's
crazy.
huge. That's a
Crazy.
huge beak. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
There you
well,
go.
you said, so what was the original question? What is the best bird?
What is the best bird?
Is that the best bird?
That's the best bird according to me.
Hey, you have an
What's
art
your
in
what's
picking
your
your.
what's your answer to that question? What's the best bird?
So like, honestly, I would jump to a bird of paradise, which is a flower.
There you go. There you go. That's a legitimate answer. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Here, now we're going to close, and I need you for something that is really important for this podcast. You're helping me build a tradition on the show. I wanted to start something with this podcast. Every guest leaves a question behind for the next guest to open with. Like, you don't know who the guest is. The guest will probably see you on the podcast and the show, but it doesn't matter. Just like your question is going to be to whoever is going to come next. And so I want you to kick off. Since you're kicking off the series, there is no question from a predecessor for you to answer, but I would love for you to be the one who starts the chain. What's a question you would want the next guest on organizational intelligence to sit with?
I think, okay, here's the organizational question. 'Cause I think it's really easy to kind of go into the negative all the time. It's kind of the nature of the work that I do, but I'm actually a really positive person. So the question that they should think about is, what was the best teaming experience that they've ever had, and what made it so great?
I love this. I think it's a very good segue to whoever is going to join next. Thank
Well, I
you.
was just gonna say thank you for thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be asked to do this. Honored to be the first episode. I'm excited to listen to others in the future. And yeah, those great questions. And I wish you nothing but the best of luck with this.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for tuning in for everyone who's listening. As you've heard today, the devil really is in the mundane. Better organizations aren't built through grand transformation programs. They're built through the small, everyday choices about how work happens. Start with your ways of working, create clarity, be intentional about how your decisions are made, how your meetings are run, how information flows, and how your teams learn together. So many of the solutions feel surprisingly simple, almost radical, because we've become so used to working around dysfunction instead of designing it out. So go back to the basics, make the implicit explicit, write things down, agree on how you will work together. Those small changes can have an outsized impact. Huge thanks to you, Sam, for joining us and sharing your insights. If you would like to follow Sam's work, connect with him on LinkedIn and check out Deliberate Works. And if you enjoy this conversation, subscribe to the Organizational Intelligence Podcast for more conversations about how work actually works. Until next time, keep questioning the way work is done and keep building organizations where people and performance can thrive together. Thank you all very much. Ta-da!